In this video, we are going to look at how we factorize and find the value of x for quadratic equations where the coefficient of x squared is not 1. Before, we're dealing with quadratic equations where the coefficient of x is 1. So again, as we continue to factorize this, it means we're supposed to get two numbers. Those two numbers are supposed to give us a sum of negative 17. That is, when we add those two numbers, we're supposed to get a sum of negative 17. And when we multiply those two numbers, they're supposed to be giving us a product of 6 times 5. And we know that 6 times this 5 is giving us 30. So where are those two numbers going to come from? Again, those two numbers are going to come from the factors of 30. So let's evaluate the factors of 30. Now, from the factors of 30, we have 1 times 30 is a factor of 30. We have 2 times 15. Now, if you look at these numbers 2 and 15, we can manipulate them to suit this condition. If I made these 2 negative and this 15 also negative, negative 2 times negative 15 will give us a positive 30, because we know that two negatives, when you multiply a negative by negative, you get a positive. So negative 2 times negative 15 will give us positive 30. So negative 2 plus negative 15 is going to give us negative 17. So it means the numbers negative 2 and negative 15 are giving us a sum of negative 17, and when we multiply them, they're giving us a product of 30. So we shall use these two numbers in trying to split this middle term into 2. So we continue with our working. So it means from here, our next step is going to become 5x squared. Then now this middle term is going to be replaced by these two roots. So it's going to be negative 2x, that is minus 2x. Then negative 15x, that is minus 15x, then plus 6 is equal to 0. You realize that negative 2 minus 15 gives us negative 17. So this leads us back to that. So when we introduce brackets right here and there, we factorize out. The common factor here is x, so we put x outside the brackets into 5x minus 2. Then the common factor here is 3. So we put negative 3 outside the brackets into 15x divided by negative 3 will give us 5x. Then the 15x divided by negative 3 gives us positive 5x. Then 6 divided by negative 3 gives us negative 2. That is equal to 0. So you realize that we're having the same terms in the brackets, and we have this outside the bracket. So we put the terms outside the brackets in its own bracket, x minus 3 in its own bracket, into 5x minus 2 is equal to 0. So at that point, we have factorized this quadratic equation. So after factorization, then we go ahead and find the value of x. Since this times that is equal to 0, and we know that if you multiply any two numbers and you get your answer as 0, it means one of those two numbers is 0. Then it means that either this one is 0 or that one is 0. So it means we shall write and say either x minus 3 is equal to 0 or 5x minus 2 is equal to 0. And when we make x the subject of the formula here, we shall have our value of x as 3. And right here, our value of x is 2 over 5. So the two values of x here are 2 over 5 and 3. Again, in this, we are supposed to factorize this number. We are supposed to get two digits or two numbers. When we add these two numbers, they're supposed to give us a sum of positive 2. And also, when we multiply them, they're supposed to give us a product of 3 times negative 5. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. So how do we get those numbers? We get those numbers by exploring the factors of 15. So we'll begin with 1 times 15. It's a factor. Then we have 3 times 5. I think 3 times 5 will give 3 and 5 will give us what we want if we manipulate them. Now, if we made this 3 a negative, you realize that negative 3 plus 5 gives us a sum of positive 2. Then negative 3 times 5 gives us a product of negative 15. So these two numbers satisfy that condition. So because they satisfy this condition, so we are going to use them to displace this middle term. So our next step here will become 3x squared minus 3x. We are now displacing this middle term. So it's minus 3x plus 5x minus 5 is equal to 0. So this, we put brackets here and right there. So the common term, the common factor here is 3x. We put 3x outside the brackets into 3x squared divided by 3x here remain with x. The negative 3x divided by 3x will remain with negative 1. Then this is going to be plus, the common factor here is 5. We put 5 outside the brackets into 5x divided by positive 5 will give us x. Then negative 5 divided by 5 will give us negative 1 is equal to 0. So we put the terms outside the brackets. The terms, these ones, we put them in their own bracket, which is going to become 3x plus 5. We put that in their brackets. Then these terms that are in the brackets, we put them in their own bracket, is equal to 0. At that point, we have factorized it. This is here, there's a factorized expression of that. So after factorization, we go ahead and find the value of x. And so from this point, it is either 3x plus 5 is equal to 0, or x minus 1 is equal to 0. And when we make x the subject of the formula here, our value of x is going to be negative 5 over 3, and or our value of x here, when we make x the subject of the formula, it's going to be equal to 1. So the two answers, or the two values of x for that expression are negative 5 over 3 and 1. This brings us to the end of this video. Thanks for tuning in. In our next video, we shall be exploring more of this. So for more videos, remember to subscribe. For Kisembo Academy, this is Arnold Rangakuramia.